Welcome again to Timișoara. I'm now together with Diana Farka, a very good, very impressive and very interesting person who is a writer. Diana, please tell us a little bit about you and your books.
So I was born in Timișoara. I started writing 8 years ago, but I finished law school and then I took a master's degree in business law. It was a quite interesting road because I always loved writing and painting, but just as a form of relaxation. I never thought I'm gonna get published. I went to visit my father in Sweden. I had 3 months with spare time. I wrote my first book. I published it here in 2015. It got such a great review and accolades, and I didn't expect it. It was very nicely viewed by critics and by writers. That's how I ended up in the Republic of Moldova, in Chisinau. I had the first event there in 2016. Then I had 4 more books and a script, which I wrote. I also signed some columns, but my biggest focus and my biggest love would be the writing of fiction novels. But when I ended up and got to see Chisinau, it was amazing because they have an amazing energy. They love everything Romanian related. They're like brothers from 2 parts of the same river. And I had like 220 women. What amazed me and made me cry, it was that when the event was over, they brought the books, and I understood that one book of mine, because normally you have the current writers that cost more because you have to pay them royalties, which you don't have to pay them if it's like more than 50 years since they're dead. Which means that if you buy a local writer, you pay for the books more. This is so important because a book costs like 150 lei, which means like a great part of their salary, like 20%, and they come and buy it. And I was very amazed of this and amazed of their presence. And it got me to my childhood because I had my parents growing up. They are amazing people, but they had a period of struggle, and they lost everything when I was 15 years old. It was a rough time. We all recovered, but it was especially rough because it's never poverty that makes people fail. It's a combination of poverty, lack of models, and lack of education. But although it sounds very rudimentary because we are trying to get ships on Mars and stuff like that, we also have a lot of problems here on Earth that need to be dealt with. One of this is the problem of books in public libraries in Romania and the Republic of Moldova. And why do I say this? Especially also getting to see that part of Moldova where they have like a Romanian lei in our currency would mean 4 or 5 parts of their money. It's like the currency between leu and euros. It's a huge gap, that's what I'm trying to say. And you could reach it through education. But the problem was they have like, let's say a normal rural library has 7,000 titles, 10,000 titles. They have it on paper because normally some of them aren't even in Romania. There are books that are like from 1940, 1950. Some of them are technic manuals. They're already, how do you say it, overcompensated because they have a lack of knowledge in technology and stuff. They're not, they're plain, they're not useful anymore, but they still have it. Why? Because it would take an amount of effort to really adapt them and to take them in the 21st century, and it would need like normal book funds in each of the library. So let's say if you get 500 books that are normally useful in the library and not 7,000, you basically have to remodel the entire public library and fill it with books.
But why do you think it's so important for the people there, and what reading, and what means reading, for example, for you?
You know, we had the pandemic, and they kept saying we are on the same boat. We are on the same boat, but there are different parts of the boat. So when you're in this boat and you're in Romania, the Republic of Moldova, or other countries that you're currently developing, and I'm going to also answer the question with the reading. What's the problem? The access to knowledge is so hard. Why? Because you have this library which is amazing and brilliant. It's in a big city, but in the villages you don't have like hot water. You don't have a toilet in the school. So we had a case with a little child that fell in the improvised toilet and it died or something. It reached the news, it reached the entire Europe. This is the normal situation for very, very, very small villages in Romania and the Republic of Moldova, because you can say 21st century knowledge. You say, why don't you digitize them? They don't have computers. If some of them don't have electricity. This is the way they live their life. If you have the children, there are children that are like from 4th grade and they go 10 miles a day, 15 miles a day to the school and back on foot because they have no way to reach the school. So if I talk about the importance of writing, for me it was huge because I had the period with my parents losing everything, and I had to, first of all, you crystallize your personality and you develop traits that will help you your entire life, because it was during adolescent years, but it also helps you survive. You get to bridge the gap, and I don't talk about the financial gap, I talk about the moral gap and the educational gap. Because even if, let's say, by any chance you get an amazing circumstances and you get to have what you wish for, like most people wish for, I don't know, roof on their top, food, basic needs that you have on the pyramid, Maslow's pyramid. But if you start life without having those basic needs, you always think about the first steps of the pyramid and you never self-actualize. You never see the big picture and also include other people, their needs, your impact on the world. If you don't have the education, or if the education is outdated, you cannot function, like truly function in the world. So for me, writing was everything because it gave me depth, and it made me see beyond the surface. I was 15 and I was modeling to make money. I had a period I lived in, they call it Monaco di Barbara in Munich. I loved it. I have an amazing woman there. She's called Rosemarie. And Rosemarie Schneider used to be chief editor for Vogue, so she was amazing. She's an amazing person. Do you know how I got my first job? Because I also heard people saying, here, if you don't have the right model and the education, they say it doesn't matter. Sure it does. Because I was sitting like this, I was like 14, and she came, she said hi, and she said, oh, you're from the country of Brâncuș. And I said, yeah, I love him, you know Brâncuș? She said, I know. You also know Ioța and stuff, and we started talking, and she said, yeah, how do you know so much? I just like to read. And she said, you're amazing. No, I'm not, I just like to read. I got a friendship out of this. I never thought it would be so, and it changed the trajectory of my life. Then I had one person, I had a contract in Bucharest. It was from something silly. It was a birthday, and he had something on his tag, and it was in hieroglyphs. And I love history, and I just went at the birthday. I didn't knew the celebrated person, it was more like a professional stuff, and I had to go pay thanks, and it was everything. And I just saw it, it flashed it, and I said, oh, you have your name. And he said, how do you know it's my name? Because it spells Adrian. And he said, how do you know this? It's in hieroglyphs. How do you know this? Because I read it. How do you read it? Because I had a teacher who liked history and just taught us hieroglyphs. And this is what she did for history. Yeah, I think it's, I don't know, it turned out to be useful. So this, it was a motive that came time and time around in my life, and actually gave me, it gives you purpose. Because you say you have values and you have things you wish for, and where do you have them from? From the books you read, from the people you meet, from the models you see. If you look at the television, you might say they are not doing such a great job in imposing those models. Maybe this is like a reset time for everyone, and we start questioning our models more, and we pay attention to the people we listen to and we read to. So it's the basic of everything. Reading, educating yourself. What happened? I went to Chișinău, I see the need for books. I come back home, I also had some projects in which I gather books here. In Alioș, several places in Romania. What happens? I say, well, we have the problem, let's find a solution. Let's like help and make the books get in the public libraries. I started like saving for a couple of hundred books. It was from the boyfriend back then. It helped me. I had some friends helping me. We had like, it was 800 or 900 books. But in the end, we ended up gathering 20,000 books and completely remodeling, like with books in the bookstand, 7 libraries, 2 in Romania and 5 in the Republic of Moldova. 5 were in the villages, like where I told you they don't have water and stuff like that. And 2 were in Timișoara. 1 was my general school, my primary school. The second one was my high school. And that was actually a surprise because my high school is one of top 3 high schools in Western Romania, so it's actually great. It's the first European school in Romania. It's nice, it's a classical high school, but they still needed the books. And I'm friends with it's an amazing person, with the director of the school. I give him a call, and then as a former student I ask, do you need the books? If we need them, of course we need them. Why? You don't have books also? He said, well, we have a need. So I say, okay, that's amazing. I think I left like 2,000 books there. What I'm trying to say, a small act of kindness like eventually ended up being thousands of acts of kindness from people all around the world. We had the press, we had people in Chișinău. We had an amazing stuff happen with a news writer. So we have 2 parts, like 2 public televisions. And then we have the private ones. One was with the East, one was with the West. It was something strange. They got together because of the event and with the book gathering. I was thinking about having an event. I had the idea on the Christmas of 2019, and I said, first of all, I thought about having it in Romania, and we can gather books, help and get the books back to the children. We can have, let's say, a book launch, because I didn't have another frame of reference. I write the books, I translate my books. So, okay, let's have a book launch or a book reading. And I started searching on Guinness World Records, and I see I already have an account. And I was thinking, oh my God, why did I made it? Because I had no interest in the topic whatsoever. And then I see that I made it the day I made my my author's page. It was 25 of December 2015, on Christmas. I had the idea of the event on Christmas in 2019. So I put the date, it was normally on March 2020. The pandemic hit. Things started spiraling. Why? Because we don't have such big streets, we don't have such big venues. The only venue, like a Polyvalent Hall in Romania, that could have hold the number of, let's say, over 6,500 or 7,000 attendees was in Cluj-Napoca. But it was closed, like completely closed, and due to the differences, we kind of like copied the politics of other countries with the pandemic, and we didn't have a frame of reference. Things keep changing, so it was impossible to predict something. It was impossible also for big countries. And then I look at my newsfeed, which is mostly about books, and then I started getting my newsfeed flushed with informations about New York. And like I have 1 news and 2 and 3 and 4, and then they ended up 45. And then it talks about the Times Square, because this is how I had the idea, and the artists and the arts, because they were like, I'm exaggerating now, but they were talking about starving artists because they had no payment, no leave, and they had to stay at home, which happened also here, maybe on a more dramatic level, bigger scale. And I said, this is it. And my team, because we had the idea of the clip of the event and we had to change everything, they said, what do you mean this is it? Like, this is it, we move it. What do you mean you move it? We move it to the United States. What do you mean you move it? You have no public, you have no one there. It doesn't matter. And what do you mean it doesn't matter? God will find a way. It was like, Jesus Christ, please don't say God will find a way. Each time I say God will find a way, because this is the way I think, they're like, whew, we hope God will find a way. I said, no, this is God's word. Trust me, we'll move it. Went on home, prayed, said we'll move it. They said, this is craziness, but we'll move it if you say we'll move it. We moved it also from, what happened was amazing. I get the first request. I had the answer from the Guinness World Records during the first emergency state. They said it's okay, it's a go. Then I changed it to New York. Then we have the second emergency state. We filmed with masks and everything. Everything was closed, only us on the streets. Then we had to do the filming. And we saw no little children to play me because it was about life story and showing people that you can do it, like you can overcome hardship and live your story, and through education and through reading. And we had no little girls that have curly hair and that resemble me. So we have in the clip, which was amazing, and they said, "You're crazy, why are you doing this?" The thing is that growing into the idea, because we had to film the clip with a team that was mixed, I told you we had a delay because we had half of team from Romania, half from America. We have Adrian Danciu, he's an amazing DOP. He normally works light and he used to work for National Geographic, still does. But with the pandemic and stuff, he also had to come back, check with the family and everything. And God just worked it out for the best. And we just had this amount of very talented people in Timișoara for the filming, had nothing in common. We had the girl, she's an actress from Cluj-Napoca. She plays my mother in the clip. She had no relation whatsoever with the event at first. She just read the book. So books truly get people together. The aim of the event would be this. Normally, as I told you, it would be 30th of March 2021. We hope it will last, it will reopen the city. It's an open air event. We'll have to formally cash some tickets, but not with money. There are no costs, just to have a very good reference of the number of people attending. In order to accomplish the world record, we need more than 6,800 people. Current record is set in India. But it was set also as a statement because it was set by a police station. They had a lot of problems in the area and they said, "This is our mark." I'm saying this would be our mark to overcome it and get more people at the event. So we should be more than 6,800 people together with the distancing in place and with the measurements if they still stick, if they don't vaccinate on time, with the compliance of all the safety measures because it was not a thing of hazardous. I just thought it was a thing of hope that will make you help. And why do I talk about helping? When you have problems of your own, you have to solve it. When you don't know how 100% and you have a spare time, that means that's time to use to help someone else. It applies with me with the books. It applies also for the Americans. Because you would say, why would the New Yorker help you? Because they had 4 months, maybe more, of lockdown, problems of their own. You cannot solve all the problems of the world in 1 hour by a book reading or something like that. But you can solve it each step at a time. But if you come at the event, if you're part of the movement of the 6,800 people, if you get the new world record and you get, let's say, 10 public libraries, not more, that are normally equipped in Romania, you change the life. Even if one children reads the book, you change the life. I'm living proof of it. And the idea was this. So you come, you get a ticket, you don't pay for it, it's just for the number of attendees. We respect the measurements and everything in place, and you bring a book. I said a copy of your favorite book, but maybe you don't want to spare your favorite book, you want to spare another book. And you can bring it at the event, and you're also gifted wine. Most people in Romania know English, even if we talk with accent, like me, we understand everything. And we do it since not middle school, I think since primary grades. It's the first foreign language. Then you have German, nice, or you have French, but mostly French or German, but English is top, the first language that you learn in school. So they have the common grounds. It would be amazing why. The books in English, even if you get them here, contemporary books, you also have it here. If they're not in Romanian, the ones that are not translated that are in English are still expensive here. It's let's say $30. For a Romanian person normally could also get a book with 5. So it's a big amount of effort if you want to get it in English. So this would be also amazing. You just get to be a part in the movement. The reading would be from the 2 of us. It normally started as a screen. I write it as a screen for the big screen because I also have a project and we do movies. It ended up being a book. You know what's funny? It was written in 2019 and it talks about isolation and it's a dystopian novel. So I still think that God works through people and it's in the small details. This is what people are going to hear at the event. And hopefully it's going to be in 30th of May.
So I'm sure it will be a success because when I see you with your motivation
I'm
and
too,
I'm
I'm
euphoric about
overly
it.
enthusiastic, sorry. Very enthusiastic.
Diana, thank you very much for
thank
your explanations and good luck for your trip to New York and with your trip.
Thank you
It
very
will
much.
be on May 30th, you said.
Yeah.
Okay, good luck. Bye.